Right, and so with that, we'll go on to the part of the show where we chat through some Sciblogs-related goodness, because this is, after all, the official Sciblogs podcast. And at this point, I'll note that all of the links we talk about are always on a post that comes out with this podcast, which you can find at sciblogs.co.nz/TOSP, which is spelled TOSP. All right, and with that, first we'll talk about a post by Grant Jacobs, who writes Code for Life. And this is fun, it's certainly close to my heart, is what books do you think geeks should read? Now, apparently he's come across an article on Wired, which do fantastic stuff, with a list of 9 books they think every geek should read. And so he's asking readers to suggest, the books every geek should read. Now, of course, people are immediately going to start arguing about the definition of geek versus nerd versus everything else, and then somebody will post the XKCD article, comic strip rather, with the Venn diagrams and those two. Look that up; it's fantastic, and I think it works perfectly. But it's really cool. I mean, the Wired apparently recognized the Wired article apparently recommended Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide, which I think is quite cool. They also recommended Watchmen, which I think is a pivotal piece of literature, frankly. So I'm all on board with that. Grant then goes forward to talk about a number of sort of computer science type books and bioinformation type books. And then mentions, obviously, pivotal books like Cosmos, the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett, Dune by Frank Herbert, Asimov's Foundation series, and then goes out to ask. So I said, Watchmen's great. I also said, well, in fact, Elf said Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I mentioned Ian M. Banks's culture novels, and Johnny Mayeville seems to be doing very well at the moment as well. Elf, do you have any thoughts? What would you put forward?
You've kind of mentioned the ones that I was already going to pick, but I would actually pick some of the fundamental classics like Roald Dahl and Dr. Seuss.
For the young geeks, certainly.
Even for the old geeks.
That's true.
They have good messages. Just because they're wrapped up in children's language doesn't mean that they're not still valid. Like the Lorax.
Oh, absolutely. I've actually let me have a look. I've got a nursery rhyme book at home, which is, let me have a look. I'm going to see if I can find the exact name because I never get it right. It's called The Space Child's Mother Goose. Now, it's a book of nursery rhymes written by a physicist. It's been out of print for ages, but you can still find it online. I got me some recently. I think it was written in something like the 50s. But yeah, they're these cute, wonderful, very sort of quirky sci-fi, physicsy, spacey nursery rhymes for kids. It's currently sitting with friends of mine who have a little person, and they were like, "This will be awesome." But certainly, I'd recommend that. I mean, if you haven't already read it, get it, give it to everybody.
I do actually have 2 other picks that I should mention. One is a book I'm reading at the moment called Flowers for Algernon, which is a sci-fi classic.
Oh, yes.
It's gorgeous. You should definitely read it. And the other one are the series of Terry Pratchett Discworld novels about science. They're called The Science of Discworld.
They're phenomenal.
There's a series of 3 of them, and they are amazing. They are my favourite books that I have ever read because they deal with proper real-world science in an engaging and humorous context.
Stunning, yeah. So for those who are familiar with popular science books, you generally have a book that explains the science. Now what Pratchett does is he has a chapter of a Discworld story. So there are 3 separate Discworld sort of stories here, and interspersed with a chapter on the Earth analog, so where they may be dealing with magic or something cultural or something societal, whatnot, he'll deal with whatever the analog on our planet would be. So certainly anything magic there would be physics related here, but they're super fun, and I started reading them when they came out. I think I was in my late teens, and just immediately was like, far out, this is cool.
Yeah, they're just absolutely epic. Right, so next one from me is a little bit meta because I haven't actually written this post yet, but I'm going to. So this last week past was the finals of the first Tell Us a Story competition held by Victoria University, and I've got to say it was phenomenal.
It was brilliant.
As one of the hosts, I'm a wee bit biased, but the recordings of the whole event is up on YouTube, or will be by the end of today. But just to say that we have 10 of the finest storytellers I've ever seen up there, and they talk on a variety of topics from cockabillies through to artificial intelligence and everything else in between, and awesome. It was really, really great to see that. So take a look at the post. I'll put up the winners and the second place and the audience picks from Nerd Night that was on Monday, and then I'm going to put one other in, which was my pick, which I shouldn't probably do, but it was just fantastic. So take a look at that.
You're allowed to editorialize in blog posts. That's the joy of them. A slightly more serious one, and the last thing we'll talk about before we move on to event-related goodness, is a post. It's a guest post by Jack Heinemann, who's with the University of Canterbury at the School of Biological Sciences. And this one is entitled "Milk, Milk Everywhere, but Not a Drop to Drink." And he's gone back and looked at some stats that show that between 1995 and 2007, the amount of milk consumed by New Zealanders has decreased by 28%. Which is interesting because that is not the case in other countries that produce milk. Major producing countries are consuming more of it and producing more of it. New Zealand, we are consuming far less of it, but we are making way more of it. I'm just looking up the stats here. If I remember correctly, it was something like in the 60s, the high 60s% is how much our production's gone up. So it's a lot. And he's saying, well, what is going on here? Why are we consuming less when this is not the pattern? And goes into the economics of being a predominantly export economy around milk, and having something like Fonterra, this enormous cooperative, which is able, the number of farms are decreasing, but the farms that we have are increasing in size, which suggests intensification. And once you get sort of one big body, you end up with a kind of clout, which is able to start having a say in our politics and our economy. And he asks the question, is this very worrying? And looks at a similar thing which has happened in Argentina, which means that the food deficit for the undernourished is actually increasing. Argentina is a major soy producer, but people are finding it, potentially, the people at the bottom, the poorest people, are finding it more difficult to eat. And saying, well, are we potentially going to end up in a situation where, well, he asked the question, would New Zealand be able to drink its own milk if we had too little to go around, or would we be trapped in a noose tightened by a ratchet that forced us to sell milk only to buy nourishment back? As we become more and more dependent on the money that dairy brings in, if anything happens to turn people overseas off New Zealand dairy, do we then have the financial resources to actually move into any other industries? Certainly it's a point worth making. It's something worth thinking about. Any particularly huge industry is probably to be looked at cautiously.
Indeed. Especially one as tied up in physicality as the dairy industry.
Yes, and we do pay a lot for our dairy comparatively to other countries. And for me, I just want cheaper cheese, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I just like watching cows.
Fair enough.
Right, so now we're on to the part of the podcast where we tell you about the interesting science events of the week. And we're not going to go through them all this week because there's just too many. There's all sorts of really cool things. Just going to pick a few interesting ones to promote. So on Thursday evening this week, Cafe Scientifique in Lower Hutt is being held. The speaker is a professor from Victoria University called Ken McKenzie, and he's a specialist in ceramics. His talk is titled "Seeking More Environmentally Friendly Cements. Do the Egyptian Pyramids Provide a Clue?" I've heard this guy talk before, and his topic is really, really interesting. It has a whole bunch of implications for greenhouse gases as well, because Portland cement manufacturer is the second biggest CO2 producer other than thermal power generation, and looking at alternatives and from alternate sources is really, really interesting. So that's on Thursday the 27th of October, and I think it starts off at 5:30, and it's at Holy Pizza.
Holy Bagel.
Holy Pizza.
Holy Pizza, okay.
Holy Pizza and Holy Bagel in Lower Hutt.
Fantastic. There's a few interesting ones on Wednesday. I'll just go through them very quickly. There's a Marie Curie lecture where Professor Alison Downard showcases some of the ways we make electrodes, enzymes, and bugs work together for us, how we can use carbon nanotubes to give us new electrical devices, and how electrochemistry may play a role in a future world of nanoscale devices. If you like chemistry type things, I would recommend getting along to that. Then Brian Easton is going to be talking about the history of New Zealand, but from an economic perspective, because he's writing a book on the subject. That is going to be in Kelvin, Wellington, which is quite cool. And then there's another one as well. Now, this seems to be a guest lecture. This is by Peter Tans from the Earth System Research Laboratory in the US. It's entitled Climate Change and the End of Exponential Growth. So an interesting mix there of, by the sound of it, science, economics, and we're not going to get into the debate about whether economics is a science, all kinds of things. So get along to that as well. Alf, have we got anything else?
The only other thing I want to mention is that on Thursday night, but if you stuck up in Auckland, at 6:30 p.m. there is a lecture on the regenerative medicine surrounding eyes and optics, and that's at the University of Auckland Business School. You can go to the link for more information if you like, but it's Professor Trevor Sherwin is talking about the various different challenges and successes in terms of treating regenerative eyes.
That's
very cool.
That would almost make up for living in Auckland. And then just a warning as well is Alf is deserting us for a couple of Sundays, next Sunday and the Sunday afterwards, because he's going away. Where are you going, Alf?
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure, but it's an island and it's sunny.
Fair enough. All right, so he's going to be doing that for a couple of weeks, and we thought that rather than folding the podcast down for a couple of weeks, because that would suck, and rather than you having to listen to me rabbit on, because that would suck as well, I'd get in a guest host. So my good friend Chelfyn Baxter will be joining us for those 2 weeks. Chelfyn is one of the two hosts. He and his wife, Helen, well, otherwise known as Misbehavior, are the hosts of The Geek Show, which is all about digital tools, life science, and sort of zeitgeist stuff. They're absolutely fantastic. The Geek Show is on every week. It's done on Radio Whammo by QEFM. Always have a look at it. They do some really interesting stuff, particularly around tech. It's also a Skype radio show, so you can sit and watch the two people as they talk to each other, which is great. So we'll look forward to Chelfyn joining us. I have no idea what else we'll be doing. We'll probably get into some big conversation about something, but should be fun.
I'll still be standing in topics to talk about, I think.
Absolutely.
Because I'm slightly OCD like that. And I'll see you guys back on the 13th of November.
Right, I'll see you next week. And as always, thank you to the Science Media Centre for the use of their gear, Vic for the use of their facilities, and Rian Sheehan for the use of his music.
Yes. See you later.
Bye.